After about a half a century in politics, Biden bids farewell in his Oval Office address last night, and everything along those lines. So, as we were saying earlier, he definitely had some thoughts around the whole notion of the oligarchy and all along those lines. So, in his farewell address, President Biden warned Americans about the rise of a tech industrial complex and unchecked abuse of power and wealth in the country. And apparently, he's going to begin his presidency next week in a delegate position, according to polls. We know how polls work and all along those lines. But a new NPR PBS News Merits poll shows that American support for President elect Donald Trump top priorities is split, despite his claims of a mandate for his agenda. So apparently, there's some mixed news in that regards and along those lines and everything like that. So as Donald Trump prepares to once again assume the office of the presidency, a new NPR PBS News and Merits poll finds that despite his claims of an unprecedented and powerful mandate, Trump may have to be careful about how far he decides to go with what he wants to do. More people hold an unfavorable than favorable view of him. Most are against pardoning those convicted of attacking the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, and they're split on whether to mass deport immigrants who are in the U.S. without legal status. And perhaps most importantly, Americans have high expectations that their personal financial situation will improve under Trump, but more think tariffs will hurt rather than help the economy. So definitely he's promised some bold actions, but as the NPR poll is showing, that might be meeting with some resistance from the politics, from the kind of the country and everything. So the politics may be tricky. Presidents often become vulnerable because of overreach. They tend to believe falsely that because they were elected, they have a mandate for everything on their agenda. And apparently, there's some news that that might not be the case. So the opening round of the second term is not going well with the public, according to Lee Marengoff, director of the Marist Institute for Public Opinion, which conducted the survey of 1,387 adults. Americans are not convinced of Trump's agenda pillars, including pardons and tariffs. Mass deportations are only getting mixed reviews. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and what goes on in that regards and in that space and everything like that. But I'm going to bring in my fellow hosts and fellow commentators and see what they've got to see about all of this. And I've actually got a question for Sasha based on a conversation that I had earlier today and everything like that. But just to let you know, Trump Attorney General pick Bondi faces Democratic questions about her independence. So she's got full support from the Republicans, but faced repeated questions from Democrats about whether she would protect the Justice Department from political influence and all along those lines. So definitely we've got all these hearings going on, and we'll see how the hearings continue and all in that space. So how you doing, Rick? I know
all
I
right,
got
I'm okay. So let me throw some statistics at you. So we have been polling Trump's approval since he announced in 2015. So we're going on 10 years of polls. In all that time, there's only been 1 week when his average net approval was higher than his net disapproval. And that was the first week of the first time he was president. It may happen again. Right now, his net disapproval is only 1.2%, which is closer to even than it's been for the past, well, since the last time he was president, since 2016, 2017. So I expect that he will have slight net approval, positive approval for maybe the first week. He screwed it up in 2017 by lying and being a baby about the crowd at his inauguration. And that started giving people the idea that this was not going to be a good presidency. If he's a dick right out of the gate, again, he will lose his little shred of positive approval.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
His first presidency may be well remembered as the great time of Donald Trump compared to what's ahead of us. Situation is actually getting worse and worse. Don't forget that all this popularity in the United States with the MAGA crowd and all that stuff, it's not resonates well in other countries. In most countries, even top politicians, they despise Donald Trump. Now, if this idea of tariffs in his first presidency seemed like a very effective, if not tariffs themselves, or at least it would be as a threatening strategy in his negotiations to get the upper hand. It's no longer the case. Everybody knows it by now. So all countries in the world, including Canada and Mexico and European Union, they already prepared packages disastrous for United States. As long as he will open his mouth and he will say one more time of some kind of tariffs, there will be just Canada, its closest country. They already prepared well over $105 billion of tariffs against American products of all kinds. So Mexico will do. Canada will cut its oil supplies, and it provides 62% of its oil supplies provides to America, on the United States. So you can't even imagine what is awaiting of Donald Trump on international scene. Now, what his very, very weak start of negotiations with Putin, he opened all his cards. He told Putin that there will be no NATO for Ukraine. There will be all territories will go to Russia. Even before negotiations started, he already gave up everything, all upper trumps that he had in his hands. He gave it all to Putin for nothing. This shows what an idiot he is.
So really Trump yesterday, hold on. Yesterday, Trump released his official inaugural portrait. Now, his previous portrait was, head up, smiling. And his new one is matching the lighting and pose of his mugshot. Head down, scowling out from under his eyes.
But that's his new that's his new picture.
So it looks like he's ready to be a tough guy and a dick. And so and as Sasha says, that may not play very well.
That may not play well around the world and everything. I did see that the Russian trolls are trying to go after the LA fire because there was an article where they're saying pro-Kremlin social media accounts and outlets have been spreading a narrative that mansions belonging to Ukrainian officials burned down in Los Angeles. So I guess they're trying to say that they don't have the support and that it's the reason for this going on and everything. But yeah, there's some folks that are spreading that narrative and all along those lines. Sasha, just really quickly, because I actually earlier today was talking to a young lady from Ukraine. I think they're in the fashion industry, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines. And they were actually shocked me. And I don't know how you're going to feel about this and everything, because I don't know how much of an anti-war effort there is in Ukraine, because I think they're part of the Ukraine that's closer to Finland, but they do live in Ukraine. But they did not have strong positive words to say about Zelensky, because they felt Zelensky was making money off of this war and all along these lines. And they were definitely feeling that the war was not a war that should have been happening and all along those lines. So like I said, I don't know if you got any messages for this particular person, but they were not the biggest fans of Zelensky because they felt that they were profiting and everything. They weren't big fans of Putin either, just to be clear about it, but they definitely felt that and we've seen this in America as well, like during the Vietnam War. That's part of the reason that there was an anti-war movement, as Rick can tell you, that there were people that
just quickly say before Sasha says, Zelensky is a rich guy. He was a movie star and a TV star and producer. He didn't become president to get rich. It's the same kind of bullshit you hear about Biden, who made $17 million in the 4 years he wasn't in politics, giving speeches and writing books. When you can make that kind of money legitimately, you don't get into stuff to do crime.
Well, like I said,
his net worth before he became president was well over $100 million. Now, for Ukraine, and actually for any money, that's kind of substantial amount. Mm-hmm. So he didn't need presidency to enrich himself, that's for sure.
Okay, well, that's fair enough.
So, Zelensky starred in either a movie or a TV show before he became president, where he played the president of
Right.
Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I saw it. It was quite quite
So
fun. He was a
it-
school teacher in that series. He was a school teacher, and all of a sudden he was in the middle of some kind of a project. He said that he's now preparing to actually get elected as a president. He told everybody, and they said, "Yeah, sure, it's a great idea." And he started as a part of the show. But it's difficult even to separate the show from the reality. All of a sudden, he playing a school teacher. He was, in fact, was preparing himself for presidency, and he won by landslide, 76%.
Yeah,
Got
he
some-
definitely won by landslide. But I guess the question I'm asking, because that was a thing that was going on earlier. It wasn't just in Ukraine; it was all over the world. And like I said, even in the days of Vietnam and everything like that, sometimes people get frustrated by the death tolls, and that is usually when peace movements start and everything. So I guess what I'm asking you is there any sort of peace movement in Ukraine, or does he just have overwhelming support of the people, and there is not a peace movement where there are people that are wanting the war to stop just so that they can have the peace going on? And is there any sort of peace movement? I've never been to Ukraine, so I don't know if that's even happens in that area. So I'm asking a legitimate question because you follow the news much more than I do in that area. Is whether it's in Russia or in Ukraine or Israel or Palestine, is there any sort of new peace movement that is out there now?
No, there is no such thing as a peace movement. This is for fools to say, peace, we want a peace. On what conditions? What is a peace in Ukraine? It means that Ukraine will give all these territories to Russia. It will be forbidden to have its own army, to join NATO, or to do anything. So it will be like a puppet in Putin's hands. But there is a peace. So you love that formula? You love the peace? Mark,
Well-
you tell me.
Well, like I said, there are people. I mean, there was some gentleman named Yuri Shelsenko back in 2023 that had this notion of a Ukrainian pacifist movement. So, like I said, I understand where you're coming from in this notion of that, but apparently there are people in that country that are supportive of that notion and everything. And there are people that I'm sure even in Ukraine that follow the philosophies of Dr. King and others that have been anti-war and everything. Now, whether that's a good policy or a bad policy, I'll let the people
How can you
debate
be
that.
anti-war when the enemy is going to ruin your city, your building, your apartment or house, wherever you live, and you say, I'm for peace, let's have a peace. And in the meantime, you are bombarded every day with
Like I said, I'll try to invite some people and you can debate with them. Like I said, because apparently there's an organization called Peace in Ukraine, which is a U.S.-based coalition, and they are calling for a ceasefire and diplomacy to the war and everything. So there are organizations that are like this and everything. Now, whether you like them or not, that's the whole
Kremlin puppets who are provoking. This is all Kremlin.
Like I said, there are definitely folks out there that are doing
but
that.
you're
And
an
like I said,
intelligent person. Why would you repeat in this program all kind of bullshit?
well, like I said, part of the show is I believe in journalism is hearing all different views. That might not be your point of view, but that's my point of view as a journalist.
Okay, please yourself. Okay, tell us more about peace in Ukraine. Okay, who else is
Understand that there are organizations that are out there that are
and every
patriotic
time.
or interested in peace in Ukraine.
Yeah. Mark, stop reading this stupid Kremlin propaganda. Why you're intelligent?
How do you know that it's
Why
Kremlin
would you use
propaganda?
that?
Can there be people? I just said it was a U.S.-based coalition.
Mark,
It had nothing to do
It
with
is.
Kremlin.
I agree with Sasha.
If you are reading that because somebody paid you money, I respect.
Nobody paid me any money.
Go ahead.
Did you get paid money to do your show?
Mark, if nobody paid you and you do this, you're useful.
No, a
idiot.
good
I'm
journalist
sorry.
gets all viewpoints.
Mark,
That's the nature of
Mark,
good journalism. Walter
stop it,
Cronkite
please.
got
You're
different
becoming a
viewpoints. That's the
useful
good journalist.
idiot. Why would you do that?
I said a good journalist studies all points
Please
of view.
get paid. Get
No,
paid.
like I said, a
You know,
good journalist studies all points of view. That is
get
my
paid
argument.
more money.
Yeah,
Get more
a
money.
good journalist to
Louis,
all
but
points
if
of view.
you repeat that
You don't
without
understand
being
journalism.
paid,
Hey,
you're just useful idiot. Why
Sasha,
would
you don't understand
become
journalism. Good
Oh,
journalists bring up all points of view. That's what good journalists do. Now, you don't have to agree with good journalism, but good
You're
journalists bring up all points of view, whether we agree with them or not. There are people that I have not agreed with on this show and other shows.
We
But I
don't
think
need
that I've seen
the
up at all
opinion
points
of
of view.
stupid
Hey, Sasha,
people to be
Sasha, we can
voiced
have a
on
whole
this
debate about this
show. We
on a whole
don't
other
need
show. We can
that
have a
at
whole
all.
journalism conversation.
I
But I'm
don't
just saying
know.
that good journalists bring up various valid points about everybody. But Rick, you wanted to bring up something.
Mark, okay.
No, I just said,
just
like,
saying,
every time Ukraine has let somebody else be in charge of Ukraine, thousands and sometimes millions of people died. Like Stalin starved Ukraine in I think the 1930s, and millions of Ukrainians died. And you can go on
4 million people died.
and so you can look at there's a list of like the pogroms of the Russian Civil War. Up to 250,000 Jews were slaughtered. Like every time Ukraine leaves itself in somebody else's hands, they get murdered. They have a history of peace means death to fucking Ukrainians.
But like I said, I was just based on the conversation I had with the young lady, and she is very much part of the peace movement. Who knows? Maybe she'll come on the show one of these days.
Then she's what Sasha said is a useful idiot, because she absorbed Russia.
That's your opinion.
The best propagandist.
That's your opinion. Like I said, she was very much anti-Putin. She was very much anti-Russia as well. So, like I said, everybody's got their own
her, right? You talked to her here in Raleigh, right?
No, I talked to her actually online. So she actually lives in your neck of the woods. She lives out in California.
Yeah, so she is what 8,000-9,000 miles away from Ukraine. She's safe.
I mean, but she's got family members that are still there. She's still trying to get her parents to move from Finland, because I just said she's on the Finnish side of Ukraine. From here to there and everything.
Ukraine.
Mark, what are her credentials? Is she a scientist? She has a public office somewhere?
Like I said, she's got different credentials. She's done everything from fashion to other jobs that she's had. So she's had a number of jobs, and her parents were actually involved in a number of things that were involved in that side of Ukrainian politics. Like I said, we can bring it on to a later time and everything. I'm not gonna defend one way or the other. I'm just saying, my only question that I asked was whether there was a peace movement around the world. That was my only question.
About Ukraine, about peace. You know what?
I said, my only question was whether there was
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
That's my only question, was that there was a peace movement. Okay. And the point that I brought up with Rick is that there have been peace movements before. Even you, Rick, had brought up the Vietnamese peace movement, which happened because people were frustrated with the war. All I was asking was, are people frustrated with the war in Ukraine? Is anybody frustrated, or is it 100% agreement? According to you, Sasha, it's 100% people that are in Ukraine that are supporting the war. That's yours. That's what you're telling me. I don't know that I can buy that 100% of anybody is
I never expected so much stupidity to hear from you as you do today. What kind of war it is? It's a Russian who attacked Ukraine. The Russians were killing civilian people every day, and you're talking about Ukraine wants war and they don't want peace and so on. Mark,
I'm just asking if there's a peace movement. That's all I asked, which is a legitimate question, and that's any place. There's a peace movement in Israel. There's been a peace movement in Israel for a number of years and everything. There are people that want to have peace in Israel, and there are peace movements around the world. That's all I asked.
Okay.
And even in the middle of war, there are conscientious objectors.
That was my point.
All right, but for the most part, I mean, I think that most of the people who are calling for peace over there at this point, I don't know about most, but I mean, people can be misinformed all on their own. But I'm sure that there's a certain push out of Russia for any kind of agitation for peace.
Okay, it's a psychological game what Russia is playing on Ukrainians, and sometimes they're successful to a certain degree. What they're trying is to say, if Russia is taking over Ukraine, maybe that's not so good. There will be some consequences. However, you'll get the peace. There will be no more bombings of your civilian population and cities and so on. It will be sort of peaceful. You'll be a little bit of a second sort citizens, but it's better than to be killed, right? So let's go and let's get the peace. Hello.
Well, Sasha, I know you came from a military background. I'm just going to ask you this question directly and everything. In your mind, and I'm asking you your mind, and I'm just asking you directly, is there any time in the world that we will ever have world peace and everything? Are we always going to have conflict, or is it always going to be one nation trying to govern another, whether that's in Africa, whether that's in Europe, or whether that's wherever it is. Or as a military person, do you ever think that there's going to be because like I said, we've had peace activists on this show and everything, and on World Edition. Is there ever going to be a time that peace can happen in the world, or is that only in the end times?
Mark, the answer is NO, which is no.
Okay.
People are very competitive creatures, and they will always compete against each other, whether it's within the city or a country or country against country. There always will be competition. There always will be conflicts. There always will be wars. And an example on Ukraine, you have to understand that each country must protect itself, must have the military force, and even better, to have nuclear weapons. That's the best.
But the nature of war will change. I just looked it up. In 2024, the Taiwanese government saw the daily average of attempted cyber attacks by China double to 2.4 million cyber attacks a day. We've been at war with China, a cyber war with China for, I don't know, forever. And China tries to screw us up, and we try to attack China too via cyber warfare. Probably same thing with Russia, but China's better at it, to the tune of millions of attacks a day. And in the future, the nature of war will change, but we're always going to have war.
Okay, so there'll always be war, but the nature of the war will change. But will it always be the kind of bloodshed war that it usually is what leads to people that are wanting peace to talk about it and everything? It's usually something that is catastrophic that gets the peace activists up in arms and everything. Cyber war is harder to regulate, and it doesn't have as much casualties. I'm not saying it doesn't have casualties, but it doesn't have as much known casualties that we can understand and everything. So I guess what I'm asking is, how long are we going to have the old-fashioned war? And if I'm hearing Sasha correctly, we're always going to have the old-fashioned war, which has got lots of casualties. I mean, I'm not saying this just happens to Ukraine. I mean, Sudan, Eritrea, my next-door neighbors are Eritreans. Eritrea and Ethiopia have been at war forever and everything. And the same with Sudan in Africa, and the same with a lot of Latin American countries as well. So I'm just asking, is there ever going to be an end to the war mindset? Because part of that is media, and you come from the media background.
I never war in Latin America for quite a long time. Who's fighting there?
Mexico is fighting. There's tons of wars in Latin America. I've talked about them on this show. You haven't heard about it? Our new shows. Mexico's in war. Venezuela has been in war. El Salvador has been in war. There's a number of wars in Latin America.
Who is fighting whom right now?
There are rebels that are fighting against the governing body, like in El Salvador.
Rebels against government, that's not the war. It's within the country, one group fighting the other group. Okay, in the United States, Republicans are fighting Democrats. So
that's different. I mean, this is like blood. This is like bloodbath. I mean, even in Mexico, there are wars that are going on. I mean, that's that whole drug war. There are people that are trying to take out governments. If they're trying to take out a government, that's a war. So they're trying to take out the leader of the government. That is a war.
Have they succeeded already?
In some cases, they have. In some of the Latin American countries, they have succeeded. I mean, there are some countries that.
What Latin American countries?
I mean, there have been coups. There have been coups in Latin America. A number of coups. I have to look them up, but I know there's been a number of coups.
When last time there was successful coup in Latin America? When?
1979 had a military coup. That was
79.
That was one, but there have been more modern ones. There have been coups.
What was the
wars. I mean, we showed a map earlier. I think it was one of our other world politics of war, of conflicts in the war. There are a number of conflicts in the war, including some that are defined as wars. We showed that in one of the old shows and everything.
Tell them stop fighting, Latin America. We all love you. Stop fighting. Have a peace, please.
And there have been conversations in Latin America about that. There have been folks that have wanted peace movements in Latin America. There's a whole peace movement in Latin America. It's not just Ukraine.
I have no problem with that. Good luck. Good luck.
Well,
so the nature of look over the next 100 years, the nature of existence is going to change. And 100 years from now, if you get old, you'll be able to get your brain downloaded into some kind of electronic system and live on. And in that case, the bloodshed, 200 years from now, there could be a war that kills 200 million people whose brains, whose identities have been stored electronically, and somebody erases them. So like the nature of warfare, the nature of existence is going to get really weird and change over the next couple hundred years. And so, yeah, war will be different. It may not be actual blood. It may be just messing with people's existences in other ways. And it will be just as disastrous, but with less actual blood spilled.
And to answer your question, in the 21st century, there have been 87 coups attempted in South America and Caribbean, with Bolivia and Ecuador being the most hit countries. And Mexico, one of the countries that has also been hit as well. So coups are all over Latin America and everything. So to think that there are not war efforts and people that are trying to topple countries in Latin America, that is totally not correct and everything. So there have definitely been a number of those.
Maybe I misunderstood what you're talking about. I thought the war would be, let's see, Venezuela has attacked Brazil. Okay, there's a war.
Wars aren't all that way. Vietnam was
no, but that's what the war is.
No, because by that definition, Vietnam was not a war. Because in Vietnam, a lot of times there are guerrilla warfare. There is guerrilla warfare as well.
There was no war in Latin America for the last at least 50 years.
No, I cannot say that, because guerrilla warfare is a real thing.
War. That's
guerrilla warfare is a real thing.
The war is now between Russia and Ukraine. That's a war.
But that's not the only war.
But I never heard that, for example, Chile has attacked Bolivia or Paraguay attacked Argentina. I never heard about that, at least for the last 50 years. Okay, that's
like I said, there have been coups and there have been
it looks like we've reached an impasse when it comes to this particular argument. However, I do have some things to bring up. How do you end a war? The United States has shown how you end a war. We showed Germany how you end a war. We showed Japan how we end a war. And we need to show Russia how we're going to end the war. You do not end the war by saying, hey, end the war, and have a bunch of hippies protest on K Street in Washington, D.C. You end the war by doing what George Patton did. You bring a military might stronger than your opponent, and you end the bloody war. Okay. And
so are you asking Trump to bring our military might into this war?
This administration will do just that.
So it's going to bring
resources and making sure that we have the ability to defend ourselves from any potential nuclear attack and have the ability to wipe out our opponent. Once you do that, this war will end.
But even Sasha himself has said that he is concerned, I don't want to put words in your mouth, about this notion of Trump kind of like doing negotiations with both sides and trying to bring them to the table, which were not in the war. But you're saying that you're thinking that the Trump administration is going to actually bring soldiers into the war in Ukraine.
You bring your Abrams tanks and your nuclear weapons to the table, and then you negotiate. Okay? And see, the real problem that we've had for the last 4 years is the current administration is a complete wimp, and there's nothing they're going to bring to any table to end it. The other problem we've had is you have enablers called China and India that tend to support Russia. And because they tend to support Russia, Russia's still around. So all those sanctions that we did were worthless as long as China trades with Russia and India trades with Russia. So until we recognize
there are some new actions that were started by U.S. Just at the beginning of this year, 2025, that neither China nor India, they're accepting Russian oil. The tankers who are bringing this oil there, they refuse to accept them in their ports. So when Russian complains, and what are we going to do with this oil? They say, just take it elsewhere. We are not going to accept you. Because China and India, they don't want to subject themselves to U.S. or possible U.S.
If we look at it, Russia is a very weak state. They only have two cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg.
That's tiny.
Right. Okay. They have a bunch of nuclear weapons that are old. We're not even sure if they work. Okay. They basically are a toothless tiger. But with China, who is actually a very strong country, supporting them, this war will continue. The minute China turns on and India turns on them, war will be over. Yeah, right.
So I looked up some numbers, like I like to do. World War I killed between 15 and 20 million people. World War II between 50 and 80 million people. I looked up the worst wars of the 21st century. The worst war was something called the Second Congo War, which I was only vaguely aware of. Killed 5 million people. The Syrian Civil War, did it kill maybe, that was the second bloodiest war. But there are all these, the Darfur conflict, the Iraq War, Afghanistan, they all killed fewer people than the world wars of the 20th century, but they still killed hundreds of thousands of people.
But Rick, if you go to history.com and everything, and that's what I think Nick is arguing for, including Nicaragua, including Chile, which by the way are Latin American countries, there have been times that we intentionally interfered in the other countries' situation and helped to overthrow the government. So is that what you're saying that we should do, is help to overthrow Russia, much in the way that we did with Iran, the 1933 Cuba?
I don't think we can. I think if you killed Putin, the people under Putin share his philosophy. Sasha, what would happen if Putin dropped dead, or if somebody assassinated?
Well, one thing will happen for sure. If Putin today, one way or another, will drop dead, the war in Ukraine will be over instantly. Whoever will come to replace Putin, he may be also a very hawkish politician, and maybe his view will be very similar to Putin's, but the war in Ukraine would stop right away.
I mean, we did that in the 60s. There was a gentleman in the Congo. You mentioned the Congo and everything. And apparently the CIA encouraged and assisted attempts to kill Lumumba and everything, because at that time they were arguing that he was a communist leader akin to Castro. And I do know that there are efforts to give more teeth to the CIA and some of those kind of agencies. So are you suggesting that maybe we should have somebody out there that would encourage an attempt, much in the way that we did with Chile as well?
In the 70s, I thought we made it illegal in the 70s for this, against U.S. law, for the CIA to do killing of foreign leaders.
Yeah, we're not into that. What we need is to show the world we're bigger, faster, and stronger. Now, one way that we can do it, which David Walker suggested, is to have a mandatory conscription, which we used to have in this country.
I'm talking about it all the time.
Yeah,
and you talk about it too. You bring in a force that's bigger, faster, and stronger. We have the money, we have the technology, and now what we need is the will to do it. We do it.
How do you get the will? How do you get today's selfish Americans?
Yeah, how are you going to get the young people that are all on their phones to agree to serve in an army?
I don't care.
How do you do it?
Say or not say.
That's why we want mandatory service.
You don't understand.
Doesn't require your agreement. You must serve or be put in jail. That's what means mandatory.
As Humphrey Sherman is, it's hell, and you need to bring hell to your opponent. You bring hell to the opponent, the war ends. You sit there and be a bunch of fairies in San Francisco jumping up and down.
Youth are already facing, hold on a second. Wait a second. Hold on a second. Youth are already facing an uptick in suicide, and that's without a mandatory. And you're going to add something that's going to increase the amount of suicide in that situation, because there's already a known crisis of the American youth. A lot of them are frustrated with the way that life is going and are wanting to have mental stuff going on. So you're going to do something that will make them in a worse situation.
Mark, suicide is not.
So what? The whole objective is to end the war, not
choose
to
suicide.
Take care of everybody who's out
they
there.
Will die sooner or later anyways. They're just making it sooner rather than later. But there is no great loss to society because it's suicide. Okay, it's a very personal decision, or there are assisted suicide, or there are all kinds of stuff. So it doesn't change anything at all. Now, what I would like to mention that the Ukrainian war offered something else, because before, if you believe that there will be major confrontation between Russia and the West or United States and so on, it would be nuclear exchange and everything will be done in a matter of a few hours or so on. That's not the case, actually, because even US and NATO, when they were some talks about Putin using tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, they were warned that there will be no nuclear retaliation from NATO and the United States. There will be conventional retaliation, but such that Putin will be the number one who will be killed as a result of that, and there will be completely destroyed the Russian occupation force in Ukraine, and so on. So now you have to make more emphasis on a conventional war rather than nuclear war. And with a conventional war, NATO and in some cases United States have problems because for the last several years they were under production of conventional weapons. Instead of 55 military companies producing military warfare, now only 5 left. In Europe is about the same situation, if not worse. So right now, all of a sudden, the conclusion of military expertise that NATO cannot fight conventional war for longer than 2 months, and some publications say even 2 weeks. Okay, let's give it 2 months. But 2 months, when this war in Ukraine going almost 3 years, there will be not enough weapons to fight this war. So right now, the Europe starts to deploying much more military producing factories and outsourcing certain things, and because this is where the problem is.
But part of that, hold on a second. Hold on a second, Rick. I'm going to actually toss this to you. Hold on a second, because I was actually going to toss this to you, Rick. Because one of the problems that exists even with the military is that the military is not the old military that it used to be. And if we're going to do modern technology and modern war, and we're going to get these soldiers, how are you going to train them to do more training in technological war? Because that's actually where war is going. Even the war that you like in Ukraine is got a lot of drone pilots and everything. So are you going to train these folks?
Well, I'll answer that.
Because you say that you don't like AI, Nick, and everything, or don't like internet for all in some cases. But how are you going to get the training to get the folks to understand that that's the new war? It's not old. It's not the old-fashioned hand.
So here's let me answer that. But first, let me talk about the history of the draft. First national draft, 1861, Civil War, draft riots in New York and other cities because people were pissed that rich guys could pay somebody else $300 to go fight in their place. The next draft, 1917, World War I. Draft after that, 1940, the build up to World War II. Then it ended at the end of World War II, then started up again 1948, the Cold War, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, all that ended in 73. So we haven't drafted anybody in more than 50 years. If we're going to draft people, there has to be an incredible benefits package to go with.
Not only that, I want to hear your answer about the training, but not only that, but one of the complaints people, hold a second, Rick, one of the complaints people had in the African American community was that you were fighting a war that you didn't even believe in and everything. Because even some of my uncles and aunts talked about that, where there was this notion of you were forced to go into a war to fight against people that looked like you and that you didn't necessarily believe in the cause. And then when you came back home, you were treated as a third-class citizen, not even second class, but a third or fourth class.
Muhammad Ali went to prison for what, 2 years? Had to give up his title because he said, "I don't want to go fight. I have no beef with Vietnamese." There's a famous quote that I don't remember, but he stood on his principles and got thrown in prison for it. But the deal is, if you training for high-tech war could be part of the benefits package, that you take a generation that knows how to code, that plays their ass off on video games. Those people are useful in the kind of remote war that is going to be some of the fighting we're going to do. But you got to give people benefits. You got to say, you give us 2 years in the military, we will help you get a house. We will give you the down payment on a house. We will give you a college education, which we've done before. We did the GI Bill. If you made it home for World War I, you got your college education paid for. It was freaking great for the country. besides all the deaths, but the
Yeah.
college.
Hey, Sasha, I got a question for you, and it's based on the Soviet time that you were in the Soviet Army and everything, and it's based on an article that I'm looking at over here and everything, but it's actually making me laugh and everything along those lines. When you were in the Soviet military, did you get a lot of sleep? Because apparently last year it was reported that lack of sleep among active duty service members has led to fatal accidents and hundreds of millions of other consequences as well. But as I recall, like I said, I did not serve in the military, but I do have relatives that served in the military, and I don't remember them getting a lot of sleep in the first place. As I recall, they were getting up at like 6 in the morning and doing a lot of training, doing the constant day and everything. So I don't think that the average soldier is getting, I'd say, 6 hours of sleep. They'd probably be lucky to get 5 and everything. So I'm just wondering, because like I said, I was not in the military, and I'll be honest and say that. But did you get a lot of sleep when you were in the?
Okay, Mark, if I will tell you that in Soviet army, people had a lot of sleep. You could sleep for 10, maybe even 11 hours a day. Would you believe me?
No, I wouldn't believe you, because I don't know that doesn't even sound like the nature of a army and everything. But if you tell me that it was your experience, so I would have my doubts and everything. But I'm just going because this is an article that came out of military publications. It was actually from the GAO, one of Nick's favorite groups, that said that the lack of sleep has left our military less combat ready and more prone to accidents. And I'm going like, who sleeps in the military?
Mark, do you remember a movie, Officer and a Gentleman?
I do remember that movie.
You remember, yeah? Okay, this is more or less, you see what people are going through the military training, and what conditions are there and what they're going through and so on. This is absolutely, I believe, a must for American people to unite as a nation, to stay together in the same place, to train together, to have some actions together, helping each other. That would create or recreate, if you wish, American nations, because today people are so divided and they're so much against each other. So this is, beside having a strong military, that also has a lot of other sides that should not be overlooked.
Well,
can you go back to the draft for a second? Because I don't think it would happen under Trump, because Trump is a guy who dodged the draft 5 times. I mean, would even Trump be as big a hypocrite to start up the military draft again?
It just depends on the situation. But it also, this whole idea of taking over Greenland, as you can see, actually has some merit, because if you look at the Arctic Circle, Greenland is very close to Russia. It makes it easier for us to deploy weapons into Greenland that can actually go into Russia. Russia's a very big country, but basically only has 2 cities you need to wipe out. You wipe out Moscow, you wipe out St. Petersburg. There's anybody else there. For Russia to attack the United States, they have to wipe out over 100 cities.
But America and Russia have launch on warning. Why would we want to get closer to Russia why would we want to set up, that would just make nuclear war more likely, because missiles on
that's one of the risks that you take. In other words, one of the risks that you take, it's a calculated risk. There may be nuclear war. We can guarantee Russia will be wiped out, but he can't guarantee we'll be wiped out. And that
hold a second, Rick. Nick and Rick, quick question for both of you, because it kind of alludes to what Sasha has said a couple of times on this show. All of us here are over 60. I'm the youngest one here and everything. I think Rick has got me by a couple of years and everything like that, but I'm the youngest one. I think that, if I remember correctly, Sasha, you're in your 70s or 80s. I think you're in that same age range and everything. It is easy for all of us to say that, because we don't know how much longer we got to be here, but it's probably a shorter window versus a longer window and everything like that, just because of the nature of lifespans. How do you justify this notion of it's okay for the world to blow up to your grandkids and your kids who are probably in their 20s? Like what advice would you give me to tell my nephews? Because I've said several times on the show, I don't have any kids, but what advice would you give me to tell my nephews, don't worry about no war, because the world might blow up. It doesn't matter. Y'all are only 17 and 18. Well, yeah, that's right, 16 and 17, respectively, and everything. So, what advice would you give me to give them, since they have a longer window of lifespan, supposedly?
Get prepared.
Maybe yes, maybe not. What makes you
Yeah,
believe
and
that they have a longer span? It all depends. See, the war, Russia can start the war even if US will be the more peaceful country, and they will say, no, we don't need Greenland, we don't need Canada, we don't need Panama Canal. Russia, we will give you back Alaska, and we will give you Brighton Beach in New York. And Russia can still start the war, believe it or not.
I agree with Sasha. They're obviously showed they're not to be trusted.
No.
So the best thing to do is be prepared. Get your Starfleet available, your Star Wars defenses available, so that you mitigate the possibility of their missiles getting through, and get your missiles ready.
No, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, Nick.
Or
But hold on a second, Rick. What do you say? You got a young daughter and everything, and by the way, the nephews are 15 and 16. What do you tell your daughter, who I'm assuming just got married, you want her to have a long life?
And jump up and down and say, "Give us."
So if Russia and if the U.S. and Russia have a significant nuclear exchange, 1/3 of the population of the northern hemisphere will be dead within 2 years. Every freaking northern hemisphere country.
Rick, how much of Russia will be dead?
Probably more than half, but there are at least 5 billion people. 5 billion people in the northern hemisphere. If you start a nuclear war that involves the exchange of dozens of warheads, 3 billion out of the 5 billion people in the northern hemisphere will be dead within 2 years. You're killing 60% of the top half of the planet. That's craziness.
But it's possible
still. It'll solve a lot of problems, though. It'll solve the Russian problem. We don't have to deal with them again. It'll solve the overpopulation problem by eliminating 50% of the population. And we don't have to listen to climate change for people anyway, because the climate will change tremendously. So
you're just stirring shit for the sake of debate. You don't really believe that we should get in a war that would kill 60% of the northern hemisphere.
The point is that you must be prepared to such.
Thank you. We have to be prepared.
You have to be prepared. And most likely it will not happen as long as you're
prepared. So you might be able to. You can prepare to fight a nuclear war. You cannot at this point stop a nuclear war by knocking nuclear missiles out of space. We don't have the technology.
You've seen what the Patriot. Have you seen what the Patriot missile defense has done for Israel? Now,
yeah, but it's two different things. Because
Iran was not a nice
missile fired from.
Okay,
a
so
missile
you need
fired. Let me make a point. Missile. You're talking about two different physics. A missile fired from Iran,
which is closer than Russia is to us, Rick. Think about it.
A missile fired from Iran into Israel is traveling at what? 12 to 1,500 miles an hour. An intercontinental ballistic missile is traveling at 25,000 miles an hour.
Rick,
you can't knock it out.
To you, it travels at that speed only when it already reaches United States or Canada or whatever.
Correct.
Now, when it just gets out of Scylla, its speed is negligible. Right. It's just going just like this, very slowly. So if that but West has a system
and that goes back to Greenland being a very strategic asset, because Greenland is closer and can knock the missiles out of their silos.
With the weapons systems we have, with the weapons system we have, any one missile that we launch against a nuclear missile has only a 44% chance of taking out that missile, and we only have a couple dozen of those defensive missiles. So if Russia launches
our defenses, we have the money, we have the technology, we need to improve our Iron Dome.
We don't really, because each side has 1,700 nuclear missiles. Hold on. You talked about hitting the missiles just as they're launched. If they're launched from a nuclear submarine, we don't know where the F they are, and so we can't intercept them upon launch. Each side has 1,700 supposedly ready-to-go missiles, and we have 24 missiles to fight 1,700. We can't. It's impossible to stop a nuclear war defensively.
And
Well,
Israel is a much smaller
Great
country. So how are you going to build an Iron Dome from New York to Florida, Florida to California? It's a much
There is
smaller
no
country.
nuclear Iron Dome.
on our Ukrainian show, we have Dr. Lockwood. Jonathan Lockwood is spent a lot of time investigating the Russian possible defenses and the U.S., and he was in a very high positions throughout his life. And what he believes that either United States already have or is under development a system of low orbit satellites manned by special trained forces. So there will be a system of, say, about 100 such missiles, and they can fire a very strong laser beam at the incoming Russian missiles, especially when it's just getting out of silo. And the technology exists. It's just a matter of implementing that. And with the SpaceX rockets, it could be done. But who knows? Maybe it's already done. We don't know that.
Could be.
I don't believe
that
it.
makes
Read a book. There's a
with
book
Russia
called Nuclear War by Annie Jacobsen that describes the state of nuclear readiness of each country and explains how we don't have anything close to that.
Oh, well, then whose fault is that, Rick? That's our fault, isn't it?
Well,
Okay.
part of it's partly the fault of physics. There's a whole chapter in the book, or half a chapter, that talks about the difference between knocking out a nuclear missile and knocking out the crappy missiles that Iran and Hezbollah fires at Israel. For one thing, there's the launch phase, yeah, but once it's out of the launch phase, then it's just traveling on a pure ballistic arc. It's really hard to pinpoint a missile, especially if it's MIRV. Multiple independently targeted reentry vehicles. One missile, when it gets close to the U.S., splits into 6 warheads. And
you're absolutely right. When it gets close to the United States, but when it just flies out of silence, it could be destroyed by very strong laser beam. And the technology exists. There is nothing to really that you have to invent, that something is missing. It's all there. And who knows? Perhaps it's already been done by United States. We don't know that. And the author of this book that you're referring to, maybe she also doesn't know that. Why would she?
We don't know. We have to do the research. Maybe we'll
possible.
invite her to the show and everything, which is what I was going to do with the peace activists.
Okay.
But you don't like it either and everything. Hey, Nick, just really quickly, because I was talking to a friend of mine, and it comes down to the military. We've got a number of people that have drones and everything along those lines. So maybe we've got to find a way to mobilize them should we ever be attacked and everything, because right now they are severely restricted. I know you know that because you're a lawyer, because they can't just fly anywhere. As a matter of fact, I think even here in North Carolina, they can't fly over certain state parks and everything along those lines because they've got all kinds of restrictions and everything. So would you be in favor if there was a calamity of us lifting those restrictions so that the drone people can be more engaged in the warfare and everything? Because right now there are severe restrictions on drone pilotry.
No, because you're talking about hobbyists as opposed to using it for military purposes. There's a big difference. Some moron who just wants to fly a drone around and interfere with our ability to fly aircraft around is a waste of time. So no, I wouldn't change those restrictions. If they're using drones for warfare, that's a whole different story. But then they're under the either USAF or they're under the U.S. Army. And the thing is, then they can use them in U.S. ports. But in terms of letting hobbyists run around and throw
But
drones.
wait a minute. If I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Sasha.
Absolutely
Weren't
not.
some of the drone pilots in the Ukraine originally hobbyists? Because I think that they were video pilots or video game
We're
people
talking
that then
about the United
were
States.
recruited
Okay.
and
We're not talking about
using their
Ukraine.
skill for fighting now.
If you
I think
ever
they
take a
were
look at a
recruited
map,
as
the
originally
United
hobbyists.
States has
Am I
more.
not incorrect, Sasha?
The United States
At
has
the
more
beginning of war,
aircraft.
yes, there were
We
most
have more airfields.
Hold on a
we
second.
have
I want
more
to hear from Sasha.
airports.
Hold on a second. I want to hear from
Not
Sasha.
Ukraine. Okay, we're bigger, badder, and stronger, and so having hobbyists because they want to throw their jet drones around is a complete waste of time. If they're
That might be a
involved in
waste of time, but
military,
I just
then
wanted
they'll
to
be
hear
in
before we
controlled
end.
situations.
Sasha, were they hobbyists originally, or were they actually
So
recruited?
what? I don't care about hobbyists.
yes, you're right. At the beginning of war,
I
there
don't
were
care about hobbyists. It's like chess
But
pots.
then
They're
Then
everywhere.
it's all changed. Now Ukraine built its own factories that are producing very sophisticated weaponry, including drones. And lately, in the last few weeks, U.S. supplied Ukraine with enough weapons to last for at least 6 months. So even if Ukraine will get no longer support from U.S. NATO, it has enough ammunition for the next 6 months of war, and a lot of superior weapons that Russia does not possess. This is why Putin now is begging for peace, because he understands that on the front line there is nothing. Look, even the small small group of Ukrainian fighters, they got a territory in Russian territory of Kursk. It's a Kursk region. And for 6 months, Russia cannot do anything against this small group of fighters from Ukraine. They cannot do. They bring in North Korean people and so on, and Ukrainians are just having.
Sasha, and I know we're winding down. What's your reaction going to be if Trump does what he says he was going to do, and there, just like there is in Israel, there is a ceasefire, say on, I'm not going to say January 21st, because I don't think that's possible, but let's say there's a ceasefire on February 1st, and there is no longer any fighting in Ukraine. What is your personal reaction going to be? Or do you think that they should continue fighting even if Trump manages to get some sort of deal in place?
My question is this. Let's see you stop the military exchanges right on the front line as it is now. So there is no more shooting. That's number one. Number two, who and how will provide any guarantees to Ukraine that Russia in 3 to 6 months or whatever will not start another attack against Ukraine? Who is going to guarantee that? There is no power in the world that can guarantee that, okay? So that's why all this peace process is simply waste of time. There is no possibility, even 1%, that there could be arranged a peace between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, and let's make something.
So there is a peace that you're still
perfectly clear is the
because they're not
United
going to be
States military budget is 6 times greater than Russia's military budget, and that's after they produced their highest budget ever. Okay, we can produce, you can imagine, 6 aircraft for each one of theirs, 6 tanks for each one of theirs, 6 ships for each one of theirs, and not even miss it. So and that's just the United States alone. We're not including NATO or the rest of Europe. The United States can bury Russia easily. And so the thing is,
if there is a will, yes.
If there's a will to do that, and like I said, that's going to be an interesting thing because Trump has actually said he's going to end the war and everything, which is why I asked the question to Sasha and everything, because if he ends the war, then I guess we got to continue Ukraine, Russia, China show, because there will still be some conflict even if the war is ended the next week and everything, because that's what he claims he's going to do. I don't know that he's going to do it. I doubt he's going to do it. But if he does it, then there would be some sort of peace talks. But peace talks can be broken. We've seen that even in Israel, where the peace talks are already being broken and everything along those lines. But it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But on that note, we're going to get on out of here because we got the Coco show that's coming our way at 6:00 and all along those lines. And yes, I was trying to needle you a little bit, Sasha. I hope you realized that. So I was trying to needle you with the whole peace conversation and everything. So hope you understood that.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.